Welcome to the Fun Astrology and Merriman Market Analyst Saturday Financial Podcast. I'm Thomas Miller. Thanks for joining us. This is the weekly and free newsletter that is published every week on MMACycles.com by financial analyst and astrologer Ray Merriman. And we have a special contributor this week that I'll tell you about here in just a second. In this newsletter, you're going to hear probably more than normal Merriman Market Analyst internal terminology. If you've been following Ray for a while or have read his books, then you know exactly what's going on. But if not, this might help you understand a little bit about what's being said in this newsletter. First of all, Ray's work, the Merriman Market Analyst platform, is based on cycles. Think of the series of verses in Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season. We operate by seasons. Well, the market operates by the same thing, basically. Cycles of time. And there are longer cycles, as in years, that you'll hear mentioned here. And then there are shorter cycles within those longer cycles. Think of Russian dolls. Shorter cycles stacked within longer cycles. You're going to hear both referenced here, so kind of separate in your mind. Is this a longer cycle or a shorter cycle? And I'll try to mention them. And then Ray's work with the sky is when these cycles trigger, when they change. Now, we are at a point in the cycle stack where a crest was expected, and that's what popped on Friday. The other thing you're going to hear are critical reversal dates, and this is where the planets, the sky, influences the price as far as these pivot points of something that was going up now is coming down, something that was going down now is going up. So critical reversal dates are based on the sky, and cycles are based on the calendar, and I hope that helps as we get into this newsletter. One other quick note. Friday afternoon is typically when this newsletter is buttoned up, but Ray had some personal business that prevented him from getting back to his computer to finish the column based on the market's volatility yesterday. So Pouyan Zolfagharnia stepped in. You've heard his name quite a bit here lately, and he's helping with the 2026 forecast book. So Ray does the first section, Pouyan does the second section. And one thing I have learned from Ray, there shall be proper attribution for one's work. And that's duly noted. All right, with that, let's roll into this week's newsletter. First of all, an article from the Wall Street Journal on Friday. U.S. stocks tumbled after President Trump posted on Truth Social that he may cancel a planned meeting with China's president and is considering a massive increase in tariffs on Chinese products. The sell-off was steep enough to wipe out weekly gains by the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ Composite. The unexpected resurrection of the trade war triggered the sell-off, according to Sam Stovall, the chief investment strategist at CFRA Research. What investors are most worried about is this trade war, along with softening employment trends, thus resulting in a recession. Now, Ray's comments, it was a pretty amazing week for the financial markets, but then again, this is also pretty amazing time band for geocosmic activity. Both Mars in the critical section of Scorpio and heliocentric Mercury in the critical section of Sagittarius were outlined in our recent special reports on gold and Bitcoin as ideal times for all-time highs. The precise timing given in those reports did not disappoint, as all-time highs were recorded in U.S. stock indices, gold, and Bitcoin in our highlighted geocosmic time band of October 7th through 15th, with a special emphasis on the moon in Gemini on Friday, October 10th. Once there, the floor fell out right on time. There's the sky part. U.S. stock markets registered new all-time highs in the S&P and NASDAQ on Thursday, October 9th. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gave an accompanying intermarket divergence sign by failing to make a new high last week. Its all-time high remained intact from the week before on October 3rd. Gold made a new all-time high on Wednesday, October 8th, followed by silver's retest of its 1980 all-time high the next day, just shy of $50. Bitcoin's all-time high was slightly earlier, October 6th, at 126,223, but was right in line with the lunar cycle time band given for a primary and possible longer-term cycle crest of September 29th to October 9th. So there's the combination of the longer-term cycle with the lunar trigger. Truly is fascinating. On Friday, October 10th, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 878 points, and Bitcoin fell to a low of 104,782. That was the largest decline in each since President Trump's earlier tariff-induced panic of early April, almost exactly 6 months ago. W.D. Gann would love the 6-month interval since the April lows, as do we. Gann was a market timer and strategist based on math in the sky about 100 years ago. Back in April, the markets recovered quickly, but I wouldn't be so sure of a repeat this time, as markets are now in a different phase of their cycle. Back then, it was within the time frame of a 3-year cycle low. It was due for a rally once that trough, the low, was in. But now there is ample time left in the primary cycle of each of these markets for lower prices to occur. On the other hand, this is a powerful geocosmic reversal period, with Venus entering Libra this week and making a grand trine with Uranus and Pluto, while also in opposition to both Saturn and Neptune. So we can't rule out that this critical reversal date coincides with a half or full primary cycle trough. But since it has also coincided with new all-time highs, that seems the more important cycle labeling for this geocosmic reversal period. Okay, what did he just say? One set of cycles says that Friday kind of one and done should have been a trough, a low, that we will now bounce back from with this Venus moving into Libra as the trigger. That was one scenario. But the other scenario is when you take the stack of our cycle dolls, we're more at a top than a bottom when you put them all together. So where typically you would expect Venus moving into Libra to be a positive, in this case, because of the stack, it might be the trigger of the top. Now back to the newsletter. Another interesting factor to keep in mind is that Venus enters Libra on October 13th for the next 3.5 weeks. This ingress tends to be more bullish historically for stocks, but also has a high correlation to an important low in silver. And that concludes Ray's Week in Review. Now let's turn to the short-term geocosmics, this now section written by Pouyan Zolfagharnia. Thursday's Wall Street Journal, the hostage deal, which President Trump announced from the White House on Wednesday, promises to close a major wound opened by the October 7, 2023, Hamas-led attacks in southern Israel, and it gives momentum to the effort to end a 2-year war that has left tens of thousands of Gazans dead and the enclave in ruins. Now, Pouyan's thoughts, including some quotes from last year's forecast book. My wife calls me Dr. Doom, he says, and complains that my astrological forecasts are often too negative. Yet, we are in a unique period where the cosmos is more optimistic and offers great hope. Ray captured this in the Forecast 2025 book published last December. Looking at the autumn ingress chart, Ray made the following forecast, quoting, "The Sun forms a 9th house stellium of conjunctions, with Mercury and the Moon also in Libra. These are favorable combinations in and of themselves. They indicate new initiatives with laws, embarking upon the task of finding common ground that all parties can support. It works especially well with the nation's international allies. They support the U.S., and the U.S. supports them. Treaties with many nations, especially in Europe and even Asia, look to be successfully started. There are 2 interesting chart patterns. One is a grand air trine between the Sun, Uranus, and Pluto, indicating great discoveries and application in technology. The other is a peculiar yod formation, the hand of God, in this and the previous ingress charts. Here we find the Sun as the midpoint of a sextile between Venus and Mars. The Sun not only makes a grand air trine, but also opposes Saturn and Neptune, whereas Venus and Mars form quincunxes to Saturn and Neptune. This hand of God signature indicates that fate, or karma, may be unfolding, and the destinies of the United States and China and other nations are being carried out as a result of 1, its prior actions, and 2, the reaction to the results of those prior activities. If handled maturely and with a degree of accountability and acceptance of responsibility, past quote-unquote offenses can be rectified. One must be willing to acknowledge their role in harmful historical events. Doing so can lead to redemption and forgiveness, and all parties can bury the past with a sense of closure and of being heard. The hurtful issues can finally be addressed, and the parties can move forward together in a spirit of greater trust. It sounds unlikely and perhaps impossible, but the cosmos moves in mysterious ways and offers opportunities like this during such rare celestial patterns. From the market's perspective, this also suggests a new bull trend in gold, or a resumption or acceleration of a bull trend. Next up is Venus in opposition to Saturn and Neptune, and at the same time in a grand air trine to Uranus and Pluto from October 11th through 17th. This just reinforces the positive dynamics discussed when the Sun made the same aspects at the start of the autumnal equinox. The difference here is that Venus is involved, which creates excitement about working and meeting other people. Charisma and attraction are strong, and people want to connect and do something together that is positive for the world or for the nation. There is an excitement about a newness of the energy afoot. This also portends new trends in fashion and style. In world governments, alliances may forge new agreements and work initiatives. It is all very futuristic." End quote. And again, that was taken from the 2025 forecast book released last year. Pouyan says, "I am currently assisting Ray in writing the Forecast 2026 book, and I can say with confidence that there is truly no other almanac like it. The depth of research, precision, and clarity it offers are exceptional. For anyone seeking unprecedented insight into the patterns shaping the year ahead, this is an invaluable resource, a work of both diligence and genuine foresight that stands unmatched in its field." With the Sun in the partnership sign of Libra, diplomacy appears to have reached a triumph. The ruler of Libra, Venus, the planet of love and peace, will be returning to its home on Monday. Hopefully, the world will see the remaining hostages and the war-ridden Palestinians allowed to return to what little remains of their homes and start rebuilding their lives. Over the coming week, we have the Venus Grand Trine with Uranus and Pluto going exact on the October 14th critical reversal date. This is a powerful alignment on the cusp of the air signs. Venus is on 0 degrees Libra, Uranus 0 degrees Gemini, and Pluto 1 degree Aquarius. It is symbolic of harmony, effortless exchange, communication, social ideas, building alliances, conceptual breakthroughs, collective synergy, renewal of human networks, revolutionary ideas, and change. At the very start of air signs, this pattern carries inaugural power and indicates new beginnings and hope. Yet the main driver for peace and the critical pivot appears to have come because of one rash and miscalculated decision by Benjamin Netanyahu when he launched an airstrike on Qatar. He made this decision on the lunar eclipse, with the Sun and South Node conjunct to his natal Saturn, and transiting Mars conjunct his natal Moon. These placements are suggestive of a person reacting aggressively and out of emotion, Moon, heat, Mars, and losing, South Node, valuable trust and integrity, Saturn, that was built over many years. This brings us to the solar eclipse on September 21st, positioned in orb of 0 degrees Libra, and in opposition to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees Aries. Falling across the world axis, this alignment marked a profound turning point in global affairs and new beginnings. Significantly, the eclipse occurred on the eve of the United Nations General Assembly, as many Western nations announced their historic recognition of the State of Palestine, a moment when celestial and political cycles seemed to mirror one another in their call for balance, resolution, and renewal. Over the past week, we have seen gold, silver, Bitcoin, and numerous financial markets breaking out to new all-time highs. Yet it was gold's break of $4,000 per troy ounce that was dominating the front pages. There is an interesting correlation I'd like to share this week between the price of gold and the Israel-Hamas war and the transit of Mars through the sign of Scorpio. Mars is the traditional planet of war and is the ruler of metals. Gold formed its 50-week trough or bottom at $1,823.50 on October 6th, 2023. That was one day before the Hamas attack. Mars then moved into Scorpio October 12th, 2023, 6 days later. It takes 2 years to go around the zodiac. Therefore, Mars has made a full rotation and is currently transiting Scorpio again. We have seen gold rally by over 123% during this period. And while this rally is not purely driven by the Israel-Hamas conflict, I would expect the peace deal to allow the precious metals to take a breath. We find ourselves in a rare and peaceful alignment, a moment to breathe, to reconnect, and to remember our shared humanity. It feels as though a long shadow has finally lifted, offering us the clarity to act with kindness and purpose. As Sadi reminds us in the Gulistan, Chapter 1, on the conduct of kings, human beings are members of a whole, in creation of one essence and soul. If one member is afflicted with pain, other members uneasy will remain. If you have no sympathy for human pain, the name of human you cannot retain. And that concludes a very powerful newsletter for this week. 2 things I'd like to mention in here. Both Ray and Pouyan mentioned this webinar on Bitcoin, gold, and silver that was hosted by Ray Merriman and Wyatt Fellows. It's available at MMACycles.com. So is the pre-publication cheapest price you will get on that forecast book, and that's available at the website as well. That's through the end of October only, then it goes up. This is the 50th time that book has been written, the Jubilee, the grand 50th anniversary of it, a copy that I wanted to own, so I got mine ordered last week. I hope you'll get yours too. Thank you so much for your time on this one, and I will see you back on the podcast on Monday. No weekly video for Fun Astrology this week. We'll just roll right into the podcast on Monday. Have a great rest of the weekend.